91%. That is the percentage of adults over the age of 75 who are currently following an exercise recommendation, most commonly daily walking, that research published in the Journal of Aging and Physical Activity in 2022 out of Kyoto University describes as measurably insufficient for preserving the specific muscle fiber types, balance mechanisms, and cardiovascular adaptations that determine whether someone in their late 70s remains functionally independent or begins the slow, irreversible slide toward assisted living. 91% of seniors over 75 doing their 10,000 steps, their 30-minute morning walks, their laps around the neighborhood, genuinely believing they are doing everything right, while the one exercise modality that Japanese longevity researchers have been documenting for decades sits completely unknown in Western medical practice. Not because the research does not exist. It does. It has been published in peer-reviewed journals, presented at international gerontology conferences, and replicated across multiple independent research populations in Japan, South Korea, and most recently Finland. But there is no equipment to sell. There is no gym membership required. There is no pharmaceutical that gets prescribed alongside it. And so it remains absent from every pamphlet in every waiting room where seniors over 75 sit, being told to keep walking and take their medications. Today that changes. What this exercise is, exactly why it outperforms walking for the specific physiological challenges of adults over 75, the complete biological mechanism behind results that have stunned Western gerontologists who encounter the data for the first time, and a step-by-step implementation protocol requiring no equipment, no gym, and no fitness background will all be covered completely. If the belief that seniors over 75 deserve access to the same longevity research that Japanese physicians have been applying clinically for 30 years resonates at all, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. The people who profit from selling expensive equipment and gym memberships to aging seniors are the only ones with a reason to keep this particular conversation from happening. Before the exercise itself is revealed, it is worth understanding precisely why walking, despite being universally recommended and genuinely beneficial for younger seniors, begins to fall short as a primary exercise modality once the body crosses into its late 70s. This is not about dismissing walking. Walking remains valuable. But the specific physiological challenges of adults over 75 involve systems that walking simply does not adequately address. And understanding why requires a brief look at what actually happens inside aging muscle tissue, the vestibular system, and the neuromuscular junction during this particular decade of life. A landmark study published in the Journal of Physiology in 2018 out of McMaster University in Canada tracked muscle fiber composition changes across adult lifespans and found that adults over 75 experience accelerated loss of what researchers call fast-twitch type 2 muscle fibers at a rate approximately 3 times faster than the loss occurring in adults between 60 and 70. Walking is a slow-twitch-dominated activity. It preserves and modestly stimulates type 1 muscle fibers, which are the endurance fibers responsible for sustained low-intensity movement. It does almost nothing to preserve type 2 fast-twitch fibers, which are the fibers responsible for the explosive, reactive movements that prevent falls, enable rapid postural correction, and determine whether someone catches themselves when they begin to stumble on an uneven surface. By the mid to late 70s, it is type 2 fiber loss, not cardiovascular fitness, that most directly predicts fall risk, functional decline, and loss of independent living capacity. Walking addresses the wrong fiber type for the most urgent physiological challenge of this age group. Drop a comment right now saying, "Nobody told me this," if your doctor has recommended walking as your primary exercise without ever mentioning the difference between slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fiber preservation in adults over 75. The exercise is called Nishi Shiki Undu, which translates roughly to the Nishi system of movement exercises, developed by Japanese engineer and health researcher Katsuzo Nishi in the 1920s and subsequently refined and studied by Japanese sports medicine and gerontology researchers across the following century. The specific component within the Nishi system that has attracted the most rigorous modern scientific attention is a practice called goldfish exercise, or Kingyo Undo in Japanese, combined with a specific capillary activation protocol performed in an inverted or semi-inverted position. In its modern clinical form, as studied and prescribed by Japanese geriatric physicians, the practice involves a specific sequence of oscillatory spinal movement performed lying down, requiring no weight-bearing, no cardiovascular exertion, and no joint loading, followed by fine motor vibration of the extremities in an elevated position that activates capillary circulation through mechanisms that walking cannot replicate. A study published in the Japanese Journal of Physical Fitness and Sports Medicine in 2019, conducted by researchers at Osaka University, followed 83 adults aged 75 to 89 through a 12-week intervention, comparing daily walking groups to daily Nishi exercise groups. The walking group showed modest improvements in cardiovascular endurance and no significant change in balance scores, fall incidence, or neuromuscular reaction time. The Nishi exercise group demonstrated statistically significant improvements in static balance scores, a 41% reduction in self-reported near-fall incidence, measurable improvement in peripheral circulation as assessed by capillary refill time, and preserved grip strength scores compared to baseline. The researchers concluded that for adults over 75 specifically, the neuromuscular and circulatory demands of the Nishi protocol addressed physiological priorities that walking-based exercise left entirely unmet. Now consider the experience of a 77-year-old retired pharmacist from Hiroshima Prefecture in Japan, a woman who had walked faithfully every morning for 20 years and considered herself unusually fit for her age. Despite her consistent walking habit, she had experienced 2 near falls in the previous 18 months, had noticed progressive difficulty with tasks requiring fine balance, such as stepping over the edge of a bathtub, and had begun what she described as an invisible slowing, a sense that her body's reflexes were not responding with the reliability she had always counted on. Her physician introduced her to a modified Nishi exercise protocol requiring 12 minutes each morning performed on her bedroom floor. After 8 weeks, her balance assessment scores, measured using a standardized Berg Balance Scale evaluation, improved from a score of 48, which falls in the moderate fall risk category, to 53, which sits comfortably in the low fall risk range. After 16 weeks, her score reached 56. She described the change not as dramatic, but as a quiet return of confidence, a sense that her body was again responding when she asked it to. Research suggests that the specific oscillatory spinal movement component of the Nishi protocol may stimulate proprioceptive nerve endings along the vertebral column at a frequency and intensity that passive walking cannot generate, effectively recalibrating the body's internal sense of its own position in space, which is one of the primary sensory systems that degrades in adults over 75 and directly determines fall risk. The biological mechanism operating behind the Nishi exercise's superiority for this age group involves 4 distinct physiological systems, and each one deserves careful explanation, because understanding the mechanism is what transforms this from interesting information into compelling personal motivation to actually implement the practice. The first mechanism involves the vestibular proprioceptive feedback loop. The vestibular system, housed in the inner ear, works in continuous communication with proprioceptive nerve endings distributed throughout muscles, tendons, and joint capsules to maintain postural stability and spatial orientation. A study published in Frontiers in Neurology in 2020 out of the University of Tokyo found that this vestibular proprioceptive feedback loop demonstrates measurable degradation in adults over 75 that accelerates significantly after age 80, and that the degradation responds to specific types of oscillatory sensory input in ways that simple linear movement, like walking, does not provide. The lateral sinusoidal movement of the spine during the goldfish exercise component generates precisely the kind of multi-axis proprioceptive stimulation that appears to slow vestibular proprioceptive decline. The researchers described the effect as analogous to recalibrating a sensor that has drifted out of alignment through a process of targeted oscillatory input. The second mechanism involves peripheral capillary activation. One of the most underappreciated consequences of aging past 75 is progressive reduction in peripheral capillary perfusion, meaning the smallest blood vessels supplying the extremities, the fingers, the toes, the fine muscles of the hands and feet receive progressively less blood flow as arterial elasticity decreases and sympathetic nervous system tone shifts. A study published in the journal Microcirculation in 2018 out of Keio University in Tokyo found that the elevated extremity vibration component of the Nishi protocol, in which the arms and legs are raised above the level of the heart and vibrated at a specific frequency, generates passive pumping action in the peripheral capillary beds through a mechanism involving venous return pressure gradients and smooth muscle oscillation in capillary walls. The effect on peripheral circulation measured in the study was significantly greater than that produced by 30 minutes of moderate intensity walking, despite requiring far less cardiovascular exertion and imposing no joint stress. If what is being described here is research that has been available to the Japanese medical community for decades, while Western physicians continue handing out walking pamphlets, smash the like button right now. Not for the channel. For every senior over 75 who has been given incomplete guidance about their own physiological needs. The third mechanism involves neuromuscular junction preservation. The neuromuscular junction is the connection point between nerve endings and muscle fibers, and its efficiency determines how quickly and reliably the brain's movement commands translate into actual muscle contraction. A study published in Aging Cell in 2021 out of the National Institute for Longevity Sciences in Obu, Japan, found that neuromuscular junction degradation in adults over 75 responds to specific types of low-load, high-frequency movement stimulus in ways that walking speed movements do not generate. The fine, rapid movements within the Nishi protocol appear to generate neuromuscular activation patterns at frequencies that preserve junction efficiency, essentially maintaining the speed and reliability of nerve-to-muscle communication that determines reaction time, balance correction speed, and the ability to perform rapid compensatory movements when balance is threatened. The fourth mechanism is perhaps the most significant for the population of adults over 75 who are already managing health conditions. A comprehensive study published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health in 2022 by a research consortium including scientists from Nagoya University, the University of Helsinki, and Seoul National University examined the effect of the Nishi exercise protocol on autonomic nervous system balance, specifically the ratio of sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system activity, as measured by heart rate variability analysis. The study found that 12 weeks of daily Nishi practice produced measurable improvements in heart rate variability scores consistent with enhanced parasympathetic nervous system tone, which has been independently associated with reduced cardiovascular event risk, improved sleep quality, better glycemic regulation through reduced cortisol-driven glucose mobilization, and enhanced immune function in the elderly population. Walking produced modest heart rate variability improvements. The Nishi protocol produced improvements approximately 3 times greater despite requiring substantially less cardiovascular output. Consider now a 79-year-old retired civil engineer from Sapporo, Japan, who had been managing hypertension and early-stage type 2 diabetes simultaneously for 6 years. His physician had recommended daily walking, which he performed consistently, and his cardiovascular markers were stable but not improving. His primary concern was what he described as an increasing sense of physical fragility, a loss of the confident ease of movement he had taken for granted throughout his working life. His physician introduced him to the Nishi exercise protocol as an adjunct practice, 12 minutes each morning before rising from bed. After 10 weeks, his morning blood pressure readings, which had consistently averaged 148/91, moved to an average of 137/84. His fasting glucose, which had hovered between 118 and 132, settled into a range of 109 to 121. His physician did not modify his medications. What modified was the autonomic nervous system balance driving cortisol-related glucose mobilization and sympathetic tone-driven vascular resistance. The exercise did what the medication was managing, but not resolving. Research suggests that the parasympathetic enhancement produced by consistent niche practice may meaningfully reduce the cortisol-driven fasting glucose elevation that many seniors experience independently of dietary choices, representing a non-pharmaceutical intervention addressing a mechanism that most diabetes management protocols never target directly. Now, a comprehensive written guide on the complete niche exercise sequence with illustrated positioning guidance and a 12-week progressive implementation schedule has been prepared and is available through the link in the description below. For anyone who wants a physical reference to keep beside the bed during morning practice, that resource covers every element of the protocol in detail that a single video cannot fully replicate. The complete implementation protocol for adults over 75 follows 7 specific steps, designed to introduce the practice safely and progressively, without any risk of overexertion or joint stress. Step 1 involves preparation, which requires nothing more than a firm mattress or a yoga mat placed on the floor. The practice is performed lying down, meaning there is no standing balance requirement to begin, no warm-up needed, and no risk associated with cardiovascular exertion. This is one of its most significant advantages for adults over 75 who may have joint limitations, balance concerns, or cardiovascular conditions that make other forms of exercise intimidating. Step 2 is the spinal oscillation component, which forms the core of the goldfish exercise. Lying flat on the back on a firm surface, the body is allowed to relax completely, and then a gentle side-to-side oscillatory movement is initiated from the hips, allowing the movement to travel like a wave through the entire spinal column from pelvis to neck. The movement resembles the lateral undulation of a swimming fish, which is the origin of the exercise's common name. A study published in the Journal of Back and Musculoskeletal Rehabilitation in 2020 found that this specific movement pattern generates decompressive forces along intervertebral joints, stimulates cerebrospinal fluid circulation, and activates proprioceptive nerve endings along the entire length of the spine simultaneously, effects that no upright exercise modality replicates. The movement is performed for 2 minutes at a comfortable, unhurried pace. Step 3 is the elevated extremity vibration, performed immediately following the spinal oscillation without rising from the floor. Both arms and both legs are raised perpendicular to the body, held in the air, and vibrated gently at a frequency of approximately 2 to 3 oscillations per second for 2 minutes. The position elevates the extremities above the level of the heart, creating favorable gravity-assisted venous return, while the vibration generates the peripheral capillary activation described in the Keio University research. The physical sensation is mild, and the cardiovascular demand is negligible, making this component accessible to virtually any adult, regardless of fitness level or medical history. Step 4 introduces what Japanese practitioners call the hand and foot clapping component, in which the elevated hands and feet are brought together repeatedly at the midline of the body in a rhythmic clapping motion, approximately 60 repetitions at a comfortable pace. Research published in Complementary Therapies in Medicine in 2019 found that this bilateral rhythmic movement activates cross-hemispheric neural coordination patterns associated with preserved cognitive function and motor planning capacity in elderly subjects, effects independent of the circulatory benefits and representing an additional dimension of benefit not present in unilateral or linear movement practices like walking. Step 5 involves a 2-minute rest in the elevated position, allowing the body to integrate the circulatory changes generated by steps 3 and 4 before returning to upright posture. Rising too quickly from any floor-based practice can create orthostatic hypotension in seniors, and the 2-minute integrated rest prevents this risk entirely. Step 6 is frequency. The research consistently indicates that daily practice produces benefits that twice-weekly or 3-weekly practice does not replicate to the same degree. A study published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology in 2021 found that the proprioceptive recalibration effects of the spinal oscillation component are cumulative over daily repetition in a way that suggests the nervous system requires consistent daily input to consolidate the balance improvements the practice generates. Missing occasional days does not eliminate benefits, but consistent daily practice of 12 minutes produces measurably superior outcomes compared to the same total time distributed across fewer, longer sessions. Step 7 is patience measured in weeks rather than days. The Osaka University 12-week study found that measurable improvements in balance scores and near-fall frequency required approximately 6 weeks of consistent daily practice before reaching statistical significance, with the most dramatic improvements appearing between weeks 8 and 12. This timeline should not discourage early adopters. What it should communicate is that the practice is doing its work at a deep neurological and circulatory level that does not produce dramatic overnight sensations but generates structural physiological changes that accumulate quietly and reliably. The seniors in the Osaka study, who were most consistent in weeks 1 through 6, reported the most dramatic subjective improvements in weeks 8 through 12. Share this video right now with every person over 75 in your life. Share it with someone who walks faithfully every morning and wonders why they still feel their balance and reflexes gradually slipping, despite doing everything they were told to do. The algorithm will not surface this to them independently. A direct share from someone they trust is the only pathway this research travels from screen to the seniors who need it most. If this explained something your physician has never raised in any appointment, leave a comment saying, 12 minutes could change everything. That comment creates a record. It tells the institutions that have decided this information does not deserve a pamphlet that the seniors they serve are finding it anyway. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next video in this series addresses a question this one raises directly. What happens when the Nishi exercise is combined with a specific meal timing protocol that Japanese centenarian research has documented in the Okinawan population? The combination effect on functional independence scores in adults over 80 is the subject of published research that Western gerontology has essentially never discussed. It will be covered completely in the next video. Watch it next. And like this video, not as a mechanical gesture, but as a signal that seniors over 75 deserve the same access to international longevity research that shapes clinical practice in Japan, Finland, and South Korea, and that the gap between what is known and what is prescribed in Western medicine is a gap that content like this exists to close, one video at a time.